All right. Shows that we're live, but
Yes, we're live.
yeah. All right.
Welcome to those watching live. We can get started. Yeah. Well, welcome, Salman. We're so excited to have you today as a U.S. University alumnus, joining us to talk about your experience at the California Polytechnic State University. So welcome.
Yep.
My name is Paula Masad, and I'm the English Language and Education USA Advisor at the U.S. Embassy. Asil?
Hi, Salman. I'm Asil Laguli. I'm an education advisor and I work with culture programs as well. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Great. And I'm Melissa Deschamps. I am the Regional Educational Advising Coordinator for the Middle East and North Africa. And we love the opportunity always to hear from students who have gone to study in the US, come back and have great stories to share about their experience. So we look forward to today's discussion.
Thank you. I guess it's my turn.
We'd like you to start off by having you tell us a little bit about yourself. Oh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my name is Salman Slayati. I'm a Qatari citizen. I went to the US to start my studies in architecture, September 2015, at Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo in California. And I just recently completed my my bachelor's degree this past summer, 2020. So just a month and a half or 2 months ago, officially.
Mabruk. Mabruk, yes.
Allah Barak Fik. Yeah. Yeah, and then earlier, before that, just to give a little bit of a background on my high school and middle school education. High school and middle school were all done in Doha, Qatar, at Qatar Academy in Al Rayyan, if you're aware of that. It's part of the Qatar Foundation educational family. And before that, my primary schooling was all over the place, but we lived in a few places in Canada as my parents were completing their doctorate studies. So I did most of my primary schooling in Canada, Ottawa, Edmonton, St. John, New Brunswick, and the rest of it. So that was my primary, and the middle and high school was all in Doha, Qatar. And then from 2015 to 2020, I did my bachelor's degree in architecture in California.
Thank you for sharing. So I'll kick off with one first question. Given your diverse schooling history and having been able to study in different places, why did you choose the US?
Well, there's a few reasons. First off, the North American region I was more familiar with, being that, you know, my parents did their postgraduate and doctorate studies over there. And I did my primary schooling in Canada. So, you know, the North American region was more comfortable for me. The second thing was that the educational system, as opposed to the European education in the college, you know, years, was a little more flexible as far as I could tell. The curriculums were more flexible. The amount of you know, units or hours or whatever I could, and there was a wide variety of things that a student was required to take in an American university, as opposed to the very narrow and focused curriculum that you usually find in the UK, which is what I was, you know, comparing against. So that was one of the main reasons. The second main reason is to do with my major of architecture. There is a difference in how architecture graduates get licensed in the US versus the UK and most of the European countries and the EU. Because with the EU region, you usually need to do a bachelor's and then a postgraduate, like a master's degree, to be able to go ahead and, you know, get your license as an architect and a practicing architect. Don't quote me on this because I'm not entirely sure, but this is as far as I can remember 5 years ago. And so with the American system, you have the AIA, the American Institute of Architects, which is a very, very prolific and very strong institution in the architecture field. And there are worldwide programs, but mostly in the US, obviously, that are AIA accredited programs. So instead of getting a bachelor's of science in architecture or getting a bachelor's of arts in architecture, you get a bachelor's of architecture. It's a 5-year program as opposed to a 4-year program, and it's what's called a professional program. So I saw that that was a much better opportunity for me going into architecture to go towards the North American region and the AIA accredited schools. Yeah.
Great. So you went in, you had a strong, you already knew really what you wanted to study when you started. You were set on architecture, or did it take you a while to just make that decision?
Well, that's a good question. I did not know what I was going to study a year before I graduated high school. I was a little all over the place as far as what I should do. Some people, gave me some advice to do this, and other people told me, you're not fit for that, and the rest of it. I had an interest in architecture and building and design and the rest of it, that kind of field really early on as a younger person, and then I lost it during middle school and the high school time. But there was always just an inkling of interest in the field, and I thought that architecture was a good mix of the art and design side of things, as well as the pragmatic and scientific, or whatever you want to call it, side of things. So it's a good mix. It's a good middle ground, and I thought it was good for a person like me that was interested in a lot of different things. And it was good. It was very good. But I almost switched out of architecture as soon, in my first quarter, because I was caught off guard. I didn't know what architecture was. I didn't research it. I didn't go to a school and see how what architecture education was like. I just thought it was buildings. It wasn't buildings, but but the education was great, and I have a professor by the name of Keith Wiley, who taught me in my first studio, first quarter, first year, 2015, 17 years old, and he was so passionate about the topic that I was like, you know what, maybe I'll just stick it out and see how it goes, and I ended up liking it.
Well, that's an amazing story. I like that connection with that professor and how he inspired you to continue, because I know that, I think a lot of students going into college and university don't necessarily know exactly what they want to do. And it is a bit of soul searching and surprises, I think. So
yeah, and it is that discovery of what the field actually means, because similarly, for undergrad, I pursued what I thought I wanted, which was journalism, but I ended up taking classes and really finding that's not what I wanted to do. But again, finding something related and staying in communications was something that it could transition. So you stayed in architecture, but did you find a branch of it that was more interesting to you, or did you just tough it out with whatever the curriculum was?
Well, that's the great thing about generally an architecture education is very flexible, even more so than most majors that I've seen at the school that I attended. The studio is a very open-ended design course where they pose a problem and then I can solve it however I want to, but I have to end up with a few drawings and a model or whatever. The professor that was in contact with me and really inspired me, Keith, was a professional model maker for a few of some really renowned architects. And so I got very interested in working with my hands and making models and scale models and the rest of it. And that type of stuff was kind of my niche as far as making and model work and physical things. And yeah, that's a great thing about an architecture education. And a lot of the majors in an American university, in the beginning, it's really annoying because you're asked to take a lot of general education courses that have nothing to do with, with your major, and it makes you really upset. But in hindsight, and even not in hindsight, I mean, in the time, you start realizing, oh, this adds a little bit of a different perspective. Now I understand how communication people think. Now I understand how people who study politics and people who study history or geography or whatever those things are, you start to, gain more of a perspective, and that ends up adding more value, in my opinion, to your work, instead of being just, really single track minded. It might be not the best for somebody who can't get themselves, on track, or keep themselves moving forward. But if you can, then it's I really think it's a great education and a great curriculum. Yeah.
So I'm curious, that's great. I mean, those core requirements, I understand what you're saying. Sometimes they're just like, really, do I have to take another math class? Or if you're not strong in math, but it does, I like the way that you pointed out that all of that sort of does contribute to your final studies and helps make you a more rounded person. But I'm curious, how did you end up at Cal Poly? Did you do the college application process? Did you do a lot of searching when you chose your U.S. university?
Yes, I'm not as sophisticated as I may seem. I just looked up best top 10 universities on Google, top 10 architecture universities on Google, and then I saw what I could apply to, and I just applied to that. That's what I did. I had a little bit of help from my advisor at school. She was helpful, telling me about the things that I would need to apply, as far as taking the literacy exam or the English exam.
The TOEFL. Did you have to do the TOEFL?
I did the IELTS, which is
IELTS, okay.
Yeah. But all the same, you can take either one and apply, and then the SAT or the ACT, depending on what's best for you, and just apply with that. Some universities required a few other things, and because I didn't plan as well, I did not prepare those things in time to apply. So that's just a recommendation for somebody. If you're looking to apply to certain universities, some of them may have some extra little requirements where you need to take an SAT subject exam in some form of something. I didn't even know subject exams existed until I went to the application process, and then figured that out myself, and I was like, oh, I can't apply to Cornell. So that's
So those timelines and being aware of those requirements is so important, right?
Yeah, very.
Yeah. So did that limit you, and did you have some universities you wanted to apply to that you weren't able to because of those deadlines?
Yes, definitely. Because I just went down the top 10 list and applied to every single one. And when I went to like a certain one and it said that it needed a subject exam, I was like, oh well, I didn't do a subject exam, so now I can't do that.
Okay.
The one that rings a bell is Cornell.
Okay.
Because I have a friend that went to Cornell.
Okay.
So that's the one that rings a bell. But other than that, I mean, Cal Poly at the year that I applied to it was ranked first in the nation for an undergraduate architecture degree. So I was more than happy to. I mean, I didn't expect to get into any, to be honest, but I did. So
you did. You got in.
Took it. Yeah.
And you finished this year, even after having to ended up with a pandemic. So congratulations to that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very nice finishing mid-pandemic. Hopefully mid-pandemic.
Yeah. We hope it's at the end.
That's also a good one.
Yeah.
So given your experience in how you approached your search process, what advice would you give to other students, perhaps to make it easier for them, or what would you suggest to them?
Well, it depends on what resources you have and what ability you have to check out the colleges. I do recommend that you either talk to somebody who has done a similar major or the same major, If you can find somebody that's done it in the same place, that's awesome. There's a lot of people that, you know, social media is now makes it really easy to get in contact with these people. You can get in contact with students that have gone there through Instagram or through whatever, and ask them a question. I mean, everyone's more than happy. I've been reached out to by a couple of people who are interested in doing architecture, and I'm always more than happy to answer any questions that anyone has. So I'm sure it's the same with everyone else. That's one way to, you know, to check out universities and check out majors that you want to take. Another thing is, if you do have the ability to visit, that's another step up. You can actually go and see the town or city that the college is in. You know, figure out if that's where you want to be for the next 4 years, and you can go ahead and do that. But I don't think it should be, you know, it shouldn't be a really high stress thing, because a lot of students at this stage really stress a lot about this type of stuff. I didn't. I'm not very, as I said, I'm not very planned as far as how I live my life. But if you are planned, and if this type of stuff stresses you out, I don't think you should be stressed out. Just find, you know, something that you want to do, apply, and especially with you know, U.S. universities, there's a real easy way to switch majors within the university, or easy ways to even switch universities and take your credits with you. You know, these things are not that hard. I know a lot of people who have switched majors multiple times, and there's no, you know, there's no shame in that. You don't have to, you know, go and just stick to what you picked first. I mean, you're picking your major and maybe what you're going to do as a career at the age of 16. So don't hold yourself too accountable. You know, take it easy on yourself, and just try and enjoy the process, as opposed to stressing out about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is one of the wonderful things about the American educational system, is the flexibility that it allows you. Yeah. So I'm curious, had you been to, it sounds like you didn't visit Cal Poly, and
Nope.
had you been to that part of California before?
Nope, never.
That was your first time.
Yes, that was my first time. I had no idea it was in such a small town even. I mean, I'm really terrible with all this. I'm not a great role model for people to model their you know, their
but you're
college,
adventuresome. You're adventuresome.
Exactly.
Yeah, I am. I just had a very few requirements. I don't really care to be in a big city. I don't really care to be in a big town, or, you know, have a lot of things going on. I just wanted a place with a good education, and I got into a top 10 school. So I was like, all right, I'm going there. And that's just how I did it.
I'm curious, did your parents have concerns about where you were going? Were they involved at all? I'm just.
Good question. No, my parents left me pretty much to be pretty independent with it. You know, they aren't really, they never really, you know, put any pressure on me to do things way, or tell me to go here or not there or whatever. They were just happy to see me, you know, go get my education, and, you know, they obviously visited while I was there, and yeah.
So when you ended up there in this small town, what was your first housing experience? Were you on campus or?
Also a very good question. Oh, we talked about this a little earlier, but yes, Cal Poly required freshman students to stay on campus.
Okay.
So also being 17 years old and not an adult, I couldn't even get myself a place.
Apartment. Yeah.
Yes. Especially because I don't have any adult with me there. So I lived on campus. It was 6 people to an apartment, 3 bedrooms. So we were 2 in each bedroom.
You didn't know anybody. You didn't know that.
I didn't know any of these people. No, none of these people. They were all American. There was no international students. We had a very, very low international body. And that's something that you might want to check up on if you're coming as an international to the US. Some people might find it a little like too much of a shock to go into, you know, a place where there's absolutely nobody from nowhere else, and they're all, you know, locals, and they're all Californians or whatever in my case. So I had our
Culture
university had
shock
something
there.
like a 0.5%, you know, student body of, you know, international student body. But yes, that was my living situation for the first year. And I didn't like the idea at first, but once I got to know the people that I lived with, that they were good people. They respected my boundaries. I respected theirs. It was very, you know, it's very easy to be straightforward with people, as long as you're, you know, straightforward in your communication, and you're like, hey, by the way, these are some, you know, some red lines that I have as far as like my own personal, you know, ethics and morals and beliefs and all that. And so they totally respect that. And I mean, maybe I lucked out, but I'm sure that's the majority, at least from what I've seen. Yeah, and that was the first year.
And so can you talk a little bit also about, so you got to know them, what other activities and things did you do on campus? Were you involved in sports or clubs and organizations, which tend to be a big thing on many campuses?
Yes, yeah, there's a huge club situation, you know, bunch of different clubs for a whole bunch of different things. You can't imagine. I mean, you can imagine, but a lot of people that, you know, haven't seen it can't imagine. They're the most niche, you know, clubs that I've ever seen, but they're interesting. You know, everyone who's got an interest starts a club, and, you know, they got, you know, activities going on. To be honest, at the first year, I was so busy with my architecture education that I didn't really join a club, and that was not good. I recommend people to find a hobby as you're doing, because if you get too caught up in your major and your education and all that, it ends up building too much stress, and you end up not getting much done, and it's just a vicious cycle. So in my second year, I did go back to Muay Thai or kickboxing. I found a gym locally that did kickboxing. I used to do it back in high school, so I got back in, and that, you know, that relieved some stress. I picked up another hobby. Also, the place that I lived in, which was the central coast of California, was very beautiful for like going out on hikes. And I didn't go to the beach much, but it was nice to be in that area. So I could go out and, you know, go for a hike or a drive or whatever when I needed to. Not the first year because I didn't have a car, but mid-second year. Yeah.
So in that first year, did you have the feelings of homesickness, and how did you deal with that?
Yes. Well, my situation was a little unique in that I didn't really feel very homesick. I'm not sure why. I had friends that were pretty homesick, but I didn't really get homesick. Uh, so I heard from friends that you know, homesickness was an issue. But I always just was busy with what I had going on. My education was pretty pretty intensive.
Okay.
So I didn't have much time to do other things. And so I was just really focused on that. I had a good connection with friends, friends from back home. So I called them every now and then, and that was a really good way, especially my first year. Now that you know, I'm talking about this, I remember. I used to be on very long calls with my friends from high school who were also studying in the region. So they were in California, Oregon, or whatever, but, you know, California is huge.
Yes.
So he's in California, but he's 4 hours away. So I just call him, and, you know, every other day, every 3 days, and, you know, we'd get to talking and catch up and all that. That helped a lot. It was very familiar for some reason. Yeah.
Yeah, keeping those ties are always really important. We talk about that in pre-departure orientation sometimes, where it's like, even if you need to take some photos or comfort snacks that can travel well, because especially in those beginning days and weeks, the homesickness may not be severe, but little things will pop up there. So it's great you had some friends to stay connected with. Did you have a chance to travel around? I mean, not necessarily, but obviously within the time that you were studying, did you see other parts of the US, get out to other parts of California? What was that like if you did?
Yeah. Later on, once I got a driver's license in the U.S. and I had a car to drive around and get around, which is also something that's important to know as far as like the U.S. cities and U.S. areas. They're very hard to get around. Public transportation is not something that really exists like it does in the EU. But if you have a car, or nowadays Uber and Lyft and all that, if you're in a city, you can get around anywhere. But once I had a car, I did explore California a lot as a state. I went all the way, up the coast and down a few times. I discovered there's an area called Humboldt County in the north of California, and that place is very beautiful, nature place. So whenever I went up there, I think it's like an 8-hour drive or something. But I'll just take.
San Francisco. Yeah. Do you do a lot of hiking?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it counts as hiking. I mean, it was just walking in nature.
Yeah.
I like to think of hiking
Enjoying
as
nature is good.
enjoying nature. Yeah, there you go. So yeah, that was a big activity, especially in California. I mean, the weather is pretty much good all year round. So it was a good thing to do every now and then. Just go out and take a walk and enjoy the surroundings. Yeah.
So what are some really memorable experiences that you've had? And they could be positive or negative, but something that really just sticks out for you during your time there.
Yes. Well, really memorable experiences. Okay. Well, I have a few experiences with the road trips that I used to take up and down the coast, and one of the most memorable road trips that I took was I had a friend in Portland, Oregon, and I decided one day to go and visit him up in Portland.
A long drive.
So it took about, I was taking my time because I had a long weekend.
Okay.
So I decided to, just, take a stroll, and it was a really long drive, but it was really enjoyable. Like midway, I picked up some coal and some burgers, and just, made myself burgers on the way, and just, I just did myself. But it was a very, very memorable trip. Yeah, and this is not recommended, but I took it alone, which is not a good idea. You should always have a traveling just in case anything happens. But I was on call with my friends, and I shared my location through Google Maps, so they had my location at all times just in case anything happened. They would know where I was. So that's a very memorable one. Let's see if I have any negative ones. I mean, I could search for a negative one, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, you can ponder on that a bit. You mentioned burgers, so I'm curious if you tasted any new foods that you just absolutely fell in love with that maybe now you miss being away from it. I'm not sure. I haven't traveled to California much, but I'm sure there's something there that was new and exciting.
My friends that have studied in California, myself, really like the guacamole that you can get in any of the restaurants that you can't find here anymore. So most of the Mexican cuisine that you can find in California is not available anymore now. So that's one of the few things that I guess you can miss. But other than that, I mean, most burgers and pizzas you can get anywhere in the world now. Yeah.
I'm curious because you had mentioned on your road trip about, you sort of gave the advice, don't travel on your own, but as far as safety and security, because that's a concern for a lot of students who are considering going to the United States to study. What are your thoughts about feeling safe and secure, and what, I guess, precautions did you take? It sounds like you're pretty adventuresome.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, if you're in any big city, or any city really, I recommend not being out too late. I discovered that the hard way. Being out, too late, at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. in downtown LA is never a good idea, because downtown LA isn't safe. and you should not be out at 2 a.m. So that's,
Because in Doha, you could do that, right? Easily. You'd be
Correct.
oh, definitely. Yeah. In
That's-
Doha, you can walk around at any time, and there's absolutely no issue. And that's what I really loved about living in San Luis Obispo, where Cal Poly is, because it's a small town, everyone knows everyone, and it was very similar to how we lived in Doha. And I could, I could walk to university and walk back, and people along the way, I started to know the people that lived in the same neighborhood, and it was very much, the same as Qatar being, a small country and knowing other people, and it was very safe as well. So I just got to, too used to the safety of Doha and the safety of San Luis Obispo, and then when I had a 6-month stint in downtown LA, because I had an internship there as part of my education, I just took the same mentality, and that was not the right thing to do. Yeah, that was.
So you learned the hard way, I suppose. It sounds.
Yes.
A little bit about internship in L.
Yeah, well, it was part of the professional electives that we took as an architecture student, and so we were set a certain amount of time. I think it was, if I remember correctly, I think it was 2 days a week we worked at a firm, and then 3 days a week we had classes, or we had our studio. Okay. So it was on and off, and for a period of about 6 months. And so I got paired up with a firm called Ball Nogues Studio. They're a studio that does a lot of installations. They have, if you've ever been to the LAX Arrival, they have a large bead hanging structure, really colorful. Next time you're there, you should notice it. It's a cool little piece. I never noticed it until I was working for them. So. But they were a really cool group, and I learned a lot from being there. And a lot of my friends worked for other firms. If anyone listening to this knows Morphosis or Tom Main, really big architect, he took on some people from our class. And there's a whole bunch of other architects that I can name, but we'll leave that for later. If you're interested.
Yeah. That's great. Melissa, did you have? I don't want to interrupt you.
Oh, no, I did. It's okay.
I thought I lost my train of thought. I was thinking, but now you've finished your degree. Do you have any plans to continue and do a master's degree, or you're done with school for a while?
Yeah. Well, as I said, I'm a very non-planning individual. I take it comes, but I would like to do a postgraduate degree in a certain field that I'm really interested in, which is like details of manufacturing and digital fabrication type stuff. We had a professor at our school who was egging a lot of us on to do a master's degree, and so he took us on a whole trip to the East Coast, to all the big schools like Harvard and MIT and the rest of them, Yale and Princeton, and he tried to get us interested in that. It worked a little bit because I was never planning to do any of that, but after I saw what they had at MIT and the research they were doing, it's very interesting. So that type of stuff is cool, and if I ever got the opportunity, I would do it. But for now, I'm done for a little bit. I want to get some working experience. I want to go ahead and do something quote unquote real, in the real world.
What would be your ideal job right now? I know you're in the process of looking.
Yeah. Well, my ideal job would be to be able to design, whether it be like installations or pavilion-sized scale things for any customer who's interested. I'm really interested in like intricate connections and details as far as architecture goes, and I'm interested in a scale that's between building and furniture. So it's not necessarily as small as furniture, and it's not something as large as a building. But you know, pavilion spaces or like single structure type things are very interesting to me because I'm really interested in, you know, in the minute type detail. Yeah. So that would be a dream.
Yeah.
Yes.
I wish you luck with that. That sounds exciting. Yeah. So do you keep in touch now with your friends from college, that your American friends? Do you stay in touch with them?
Yes, very much so. I'm a type of person who's very selective with the friends I make, and actually that's another thing as far as like social differences. Coming from where I come from, Doha, Qatar, to the U.S., I would meet somebody, you know, and introduce myself, and we would talk for maybe 3 minutes, and I would then be classified as their friend, which was not. It's a very American thing or Californian thing, maybe, but it was very weird to me. I was like, I don't know you that well, that I'm your friend. I mean, it was really interesting. And so it weirded me out for the first little bit because I don't I don't just meet somebody and call them my friend. You know, it takes a little bit of knowing and who you are and hanging out, and then I'll be like, okay, you're my friend, because the way friendship works, at least you know in our society, is it's a very tight knit thing. Like the friends that I have, I've kept in touch with since since they've been my friends. So I did meet two of my friends in the U.S. That I still keep in touch with. You know, on a weekly basis, we send messages to each other, or you know, we call every once in a while, and yeah, I keep up with them, and then there's a few people that you know I've known throughout the years that every once in a while I'll catch up with. They'll ask how I'm doing, or I'll ask what they're up to, and yeah, I think it's really there's no point in going 8,000 miles away to study if you're not going to get to know anyone and make friends. Um, I know a lot of people that go and isolate themselves within their own microcosm, because they go as a group of friends, maybe or 3 or 4 people, and they end up not making any friends outside of their group. And it's like, I mean, you might as well have just studied at home.
Stayed in Doha.
Yeah.
Curious though, did you find yourself having to educate people a lot about your culture? Where's Qatar? Being a Muslim, did you get a lot of questions about that?
I got a few questions. I think American society in general, or Americans in general, are very nice about their interactions with people. They're not very confrontational, and they're usually, you know, I'm generalizing, but that's what I found.
Yeah.
So there were a few questions, and I honestly like when people ask questions. If they don't know something about me, they want to know something about me. It's quite humbling to get somebody asking you a question about, oh, where do you come from, or what's your faith, what's this, or what's that. I enjoy that and I respect it a lot. So yeah, I did get a few questions, and I was more than happy to explain. For example, when I was living in the apartment, I had to explain to my roommates that, hey, I don't eat pork, so you're gonna have to make sure that you don't use my cutlery and my plates and pans if you're gonna cook any of that. And they were totally, accepting. They're like, oh, okay, that's your faith and that's whatever, for sure. We'll just keep it on one side, and you get this area, so we won't touch any of your stuff. And yeah, things like that. Sometimes you should, my recommendation is that sometimes if you feel like somebody's disrespecting you, it's probably because they don't know that they're doing it. So instead of being shy about it, or being angry from whatever you call that, being
I know what you mean. Yeah, being
whatever that word is, it's that. Instead of being that, be a little more confrontational and be nice about it, but let them know that, hey, by the way, my faith doesn't allow this and this, or in my society this is considered rude, or whatever, and I'm sure they'll respond being like, I didn't know, I'm sorry, we'll try not to do it again, or ask a question. and
can't assume that they know. Yeah. And
exactly.
So that's wonderful that you were able to share that, and that they were able to respect your boundaries. It's really
Definitely.
it's nice.
Yeah.
Was that a surprising element of the experience, or is that something you were expecting or didn't even think about in terms of how that interaction might go?
Well, I mentioned that in my earlier years I lived in Canada, and I'm not sure if you've heard anything about the Canadians, but the Canadians are quite nice, as far as I know. So I've had similar experiences as a young boy when I was in Canada. So I expected a similar thing once I was in California. I expected it less, just because, you know, general stereotypes, you know, make their way around. But I was pleasantly surprised at the level of respect. I knew that, you know, they would be respectful because human beings generally respect each other, but at the level of respect, it was very nice to see, and it was reciprocal. Obviously, you know, I respect everyone by default, and if you respect me back, I respect it even more.
If you were to start all over from the beginning, is there something you would have done differently, or you would recommend maybe someone else do? Would you have chosen another location? In retrospect, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. To be honest, I'm really happy with the way things went. There are a few things that I would have done differently, or I do recommend people to do differently. As far as during my second and third year there, and also my last year, actually, I lived by myself. My fourth year, I lived with roommates again, but during my second and third and fifth year, I lived by myself. And living by yourself in the beginning, I do not recommend it myself, just because, especially if you're alone, you know, you didn't go to the city, you don't have two or three of your friends from high school that you have gone, you know, with, so you don't have anyone to, you know, direct contact with. It gets really lonely, and it'll add on to your, you know, whatever homesickness you have, or whatever stress level you're feeling, or that type of thing. So I do recommend that you live with somebody. You know, if you can get a 2-bedroom apartment and you know, share it with somebody else, that's really good. And even if it's somebody that you don't know, I mean, I lived with 5 other people that I didn't know. Things are fine. I'm still here. It's all good. So yeah, it's not that big of a deal, but it is quite the shock, as far as like you're living at home with your family, and you know, you're surrounded by friends and people you've known for years and years. So it's really hard to just, you know, remove yourself and go to a place where you know nobody, you have no friends, and it's you know, it's very far away from anyone you know. So, you know, I mean, technology exists. You can call people, you can FaceTime, you can Zoom, you can whatever. But in your day-to-day, I think you should. I think you shouldn't live alone in your first few years, especially if you're susceptible to that type of stuff, as far as like loneliness or depression, or you know, or stress levels, or any of that stuff, or homesickness. Yeah, that's something that I would change.
Great.
Yeah.
And what were your parents like during your time there? Did they come to visit a lot? I know they must know, and obviously very comfortable with the fact that you're very adventurous. So did you engage with them a lot in the US, or was that something they kind of just let you do your thing?
Yeah, my parents are, you know, they've given me quite a bit of responsibility early on, and a high level of independence, as far as, you know, my day to day. I was very autonomous since the time I was, you know, in middle school, and that's thanks to them, because, you know, they gave me a lot of responsibilities. So they never really, you know, bothered with you know, coming to check up every, you know, too often or whatever. Both my parents are medical doctors, so every once in a while my father would have a convention, like a neurosurgery convention in San Diego, and they would land in LAX, and I would either come down to meet them in Los Angeles, or he would drive up and meet me there. And I mean, I guess I probably got a visit from my parents once a year, maybe twice a year if they had 2 conventions that year. But usually it was the once a year. Yeah.
Great.
Well, it sounds like you had a fantastic experience, and I'm really excited for your next steps, whatever they are. It's in Doha, or if you're back at MIT or something, or Harvard, or where doing your master's. Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. We have one person that's joined us on the Zoom chat, Ryan. Ryan, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask? You can unmute yourself.
No, I'm good for now.
Well, thank you. Okay. Thank you, Ryan. And I'm going to ask Asil. Asil's been to see if we have any questions from any other participants.
Hey, no, sorry, there were no questions, but maybe like if you would like to share some tips with students and parents, and what things do they need to know before going to the States, and you wished that someone had told you about them?
Good question.
All right. Things that I wish I was told. I don't know. I mean, I didn't really hit that many road bumps along the way. I guess I'm really lucky. But I think as far as things I would have known,
Maybe
I was very concerned with my education.
Yeah. So maybe like differences in the law system, like some shocking facts about maybe culture or traditions. Something like that might sometimes strike an international student or someone from the Arab world visiting place in the Western world. So sometimes people find difficulties with these, and they get struck by differences.
And maybe because you had your experience in Canada, you had already had some glimpses, but I'm curious, maybe your friends shared something that that just took them by surprise in a sense.
Yeah. Well, the driving culture in Qatar is one thing that's very different than the driving culture in the US.
Oh, that's a good one to talk about.
Yeah, that's one of the main things that I keep hearing about. And the driving culture or rules or laws in the US are quite strict, and you should follow them because they're the laws. So that's one thing that I've heard, a lot of people either complain about or, get caught up in or whatever. The way that I know it works is if you have an international license, I think depending on the state, you're allowed to drive for a while with that international license, for about 6 months or so. But then afterwards, you're required to have an American license. So I recommend if you're going to go over there and you're going to drive, which is almost 100%, then you should definitely go through the American licensing, process and get your license and learn how to drive on American roads by American rules. And that way you can avoid any of those issues, in the future.
Those
Plus,
speeding
it
tickets,
lowers your insurance a lot. So if you're gonna pay insurance on your car, it's a lot cheaper if you're licensed in the US as opposed to having an international license and trying to, pay insurance on your car. So that's a little life tip, I guess.
That's great advice, especially with you driving up and down the state of California.
I know. So what kind of support did you get from the university with some of that? Were you, because if there wasn't a lot of international students, was there an international student office? What services did they have on your campus?
Yeah, well, the international student office was pretty small. I mean, as far as like help, it was mostly just to do with paperwork. So if I needed my I-20 signed so I could travel and come back, that's another thing with the paperwork. I really recommend students to be on top of their papers. It's a story for recording, I guess. When I first got to the US, I left my house in Doha, and I had my F1 visa in my passport, but you're also required to take your original I-20 papers. Now, this is not something that I knew. But I had photocopies of my I-20 because thank God my dad told me to always have photocopies of everything. So I had a scan of it, and when I got to the airport, the lady at the counter, at the check-in counter, told me that because you have an F1 visa, you need your I-20 papers. And at that point, I'm not sure why she didn't check and let me in, but she didn't check that I had them and let me in. But she told me that I needed them. So I went to the computer, the closest computer, and printed out a copy of the scanned I-20 papers that I had. And then when I got all the way to the US, I got to immigration and I gave them this copy of the I-20. And I was asked where the original copy of the I-20 was. And I told them, you know, with all honesty, I was like, I did not know that I needed my original I-20. This is my first time coming here as a student. And you know, I'm really sorry, but you know, this is a copy, and and you know, and then I had to answer a few questions as far as like where I'm going and which university I'm at and all that. And I think they had to contact my university, but I'm not sure. But all that to say, I got in, thankfully. But all that to say, you should definitely have your papers in check. You know, U.S. immigration is pretty tight. So you don't want to, you know, you don't want to play around with that. So have your papers in order. And I forgot what the question was, but is this still on topic?
Yeah, it's a great response.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Advice and guidance about how to prepare. Yeah.
Yes.
No.
So just keep your papers in order, your I-20, your F1, and have copies as well, just in case.
That's good advice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So something else also related to the question about culture and maybe some differences. So what about time commitment and being on time and submitting your assignments on time, all these time commitments, because there is a great difference between the Arab world and Western world with regard to time commitment, right?
Yeah, well, I was on time to this call, so you know I learned from the Americans, right? That was a joke. I think there's definitely some of that. A lot of the Arab world, you know, there's a stereotype for a reason that you know, 5 minutes means 10 and 10 means 20 and the rest of it. So I do think that yes, time commitments are a thing in college and university, but they are also in the schools that you've gone to probably. Like if you're at a high school right now, you probably have to meet deadlines. And it's the same way in college, you have to meet deadlines. And if you meet the deadlines, well, you don't get the grade, or you don't get, you know, you don't finish the class, you don't get your degree and the rest of it. So I recommend that you know, meet the deadlines. This is coming from somebody who wasn't the best at meeting deadlines, but I made it through. So I recommend that you meet deadlines and try and not procrastinate as I do. And yeah, just I don't know, just be a good student, I guess, or try your best.
So if you had to convince someone in Doha who's on the fence or is completely like, I'm not thinking of the US at all, if you had to try to convince them or give them a reason why they would want to consider the US for university studies, what would you say to them?
Well, if they're in Qatar, they actually have some American options.
Yeah.
So it's that's what, if they don't want to leave the country and that's their reasoning, then I would actually point them toward a lot of the American universities that we already have here, as far as, you know, Carnegie Mellon or Cornell. Well, Cornell if you're doing medical, or, you know, Northwestern, you know, we have a few. So you could do any of those, but the choices are really limited here in Qatar. So most likely you're going to want to do, you know, something that's outside, because the options there are more, and also the experience as far as like independence that you learn being away from home is one of the big positives to studying outside of Doha. I mean, right now the education, as far as like education level, I think they're pretty on par. If you're doing the same major here at Carnegie Mellon and you're doing that major in, I don't know, any university in the US, then they're probably going to be the same education, but the lifestyle and the independence that you learn and, you know, the culture that you gain as far as perspective is a lot more to add on to your life experience, as opposed to being in the same, you know, routine and same lifestyle and same area and same space, and just getting that education as a continuation to your, you know, to your studies. So that's one thing. The other thing is that whole point about independence and all that can work for any country. So now the question comes as far as like, it's mostly the EU or the UK versus the US. That's most what people talk about here in Qatar. Those are the two places that people are most comfortable going to. They're the easiest transitions. Just because a lot of our high school systems are either British systems or American systems. Mm-hmm. So what I would say there is see how you want to learn or how you best learn. Because with the UK system and the EU, as far as I know, and the people that have gone there, it is very, very focused and very single track. So you will get a program and you will follow that program as everyone else will follow it in your major, and you will finish that program with a degree, and that's how it goes. Whereas in the US, it's not single track at all. It's very multi-tracked, and you can get confused and you can get lost. But if you want to increase your knowledge and have a broader knowledge of things, then I really recommend the US route because that, you know, that path is just so much better rounded. It's a well-rounded, you know, program. I see better well-rounded than most other programs that I've seen in other places. So that's my word on U.S. education.
You sold it to me, so
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. The options and the flexibility have great appeal.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what tips do you have for students who need to learn to be independent, or they need to expect to be independent when they go to the States? Because as Arab families, like young people who live in big families, and they have sometimes servants, or they have their mother or sister, or those who are married, their wife taking care of their needs. So what would you say to students before going to the States, and what types of services they would find, and who is going to help them with those things?
Okay, that's a good question. I'm, like you said, I'm a little bit of a special case, just being, you know, my earlier life was in Canada, so I experienced a little bit of that North American lifestyle, and then I came back and then I went. So the way that I would put it is, in really short terms, I think if you're going to the US or studying outside in general, you should just be prepared to grow up as far as like, you know, your independence and you know, how much responsibility you take on yourself. If you're not a responsible person right now, start taking responsibility, at least in this final 2 years of your schooling, because you're going to find it very difficult to have all that responsibility on you at once. So try and you know, try and slowly build up to the point where you can be as independent as you need to be. That's one thing. The other thing is there are a lot of ways to make things easier on yourself. For example, if you don't want to do laundry, there are laundromats and places that you can go and take your laundry and pay a fee, and they'll do your laundry. If that's one of your worries, that's fine. If you're not a great cook, you can eat out. There's plenty of good options. You can go and eat at a place, you know, and that's fine. If you are not the cleanest person and you don't want to clean your apartment, you can also get a service to clean your apartment. But I don't recommend any of those things, to be completely honest. I recommend you actually take some responsibility and try to do it yourself, if only for the experience, and then, and then pass it on in the next year or the second, second, third year that you're there. You can make an excuse for yourself and get all the services done for you if you want to. But as far as like being independent and responsible, I think you should at least try it and try and build some of that responsibility, because it gives you a lot of confidence, to be honest. In hindsight, once you're done with school and you're back home, now you look at all those things where you used to depend on your parents or depend on other people at home to help you with, and you look at it and you're like, hey, I can do that because I've been doing that. And now I have the ability to be completely independent. You've never tried to be completely independent, so you have to give it a try, be completely independent, and then you have that confidence level to go back to independence if you need to, once you're done and you're back home and you're surrounded by family and the rest of it.
True, and it also helps them develop the skill of time management as well, because you have very limited time. You have to take care of almost all, like a variety of tasks, and you have to be self-reliant and take care of all the tasks. Great, thank you so much.
Thank you. See, I want to say thank you, Salman. I realize we're just coming up to 8 o'clock. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us today in this wonderful conversation and to share this time of your life. You're studying in the United States, and to share your information with us. It's been fascinating. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was very fun talking to you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you
We
so
look
much.
forward to meeting again. Thank you.